glory.
I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump at me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. You can find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter and at fulltimefantasy.com, where you can hear Jim Day of FF Champs, Adam Ronis, and Dr. Roto from SiriusXM, and Bob Lung of the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, along with Anthony Servino of FF Faceoff, and many other podcasts, including ourselves. We, again, are proud members of that network. Today, we are going to be continuing our little storyline series. We were supposed to have a special guest with us. He got sick, so it is just going to be me and Dennis. Today, we'll be doing the Rams storylines. We will be doing a little bit of higher or lower on fantasy quarterbacks, and then we'll be talking about a tweet that Mr. Brad Kelly, I believe of the Draft Network, set out earlier. Dennis, what's going on? How was your weekend?
Man, I had a fantastic weekend. The Columbus Symphony Orchestra was playing the music of Pink Floyd with this band called the Windborns. Now, I don't know, you're probably not old enough, but in the 80s, there was this progressive metal band called Zebra. And their singer's name was Randy Jackson, not the dude from American Idol, a different guy. Phenomenal singer. And so he's the front man. So they played all this Pink Floyd music from, when I used to smoke a ton of weed when I was younger. And my wife was funny. She's like, I'm going to probably know 2 songs. I'm like, no, you'll know at least 5 songs. She knew like 9 out of 10 songs. It was great. She's like, wow, when did I hear this stuff?
Very
It was
nice.
great. The weather was perfect. We couldn't have asked for a better night. It was probably 73 degrees, a slight breeze, table full of Mexican food from the local taco truck next door. It was phenomenal. My last couple dates that I've done, I've hit home runs on. I'm on quite a streak.
Hey, well, that's all. We got to keep it going, then, buddy. We got to keep it going. Don't curse it. Don't speak it out that much into the ether. We don't want to mess that up. But you got to keep it going, man. Don't let her down. Don't let her down.
I don't know if I can take the pressure though.
Yeah, that is true. When you're knocking out that many good dates, it is kind of hard to keep the threshold up there. I had a pretty good weekend too. Took the kids to Toy Story 4. I don't know if you're a fan of the Toy Story series. I grew up with those movies, so very good movie. If you guys haven't seen it, it is worth seeing. Not quite as good as the other ones, in my opinion. Did choke up a little bit at the end there. There's a nice little goodbye, I guess is the way to put it, but I really enjoyed that. It was my youngest son's first movie experience at a movie theater, and he was amazing. So that was awesome as well, because it's always kind of interesting when you take your kids to the movies for the first time, how they're going to act, because you don't want to be that one parent with the annoying kid, because there was a shit ton of them there. It was really kind of annoying. Like, I'm just trying to enjoy my movie, and all these kids are screaming, but my son, thank God, was not one of them. But it was an awesome movie. So, again, if any of you guys are fans of the series and weren't sure if it was going to be good, it's definitely worth watching. So I would suggest you guys checking it out.
Well, no, I really enjoyed the Toy Story movies. My son actually ended up going, the 8-year-old, with one of his friends yesterday. And it was, or maybe it was Saturday, actually, when we were at the Pink Floyd show. So he went with one of his friends. So my wife told me that that's what they were going to do. And I was a little bit like, that's kind of one of those family things I would have liked to have done. But, I didn't want to begrudging. We needed a babysitter, and so that worked out perfect.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely take your wife. You guys grew up watching the movies too, like I did. It's worth it. It's a good movie, man. It really is. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Pixar and all their movies, so I would say it's probably, unfortunately, the worst of the 4, but that's not in the saying that it's a bad movie. It was really good. I'm just a huge fan of the first 2, and I actually kind of thought the third one was really good as well. This one it's really kind of focused on a couple characters, so I'm hoping that it's not the last one. Obviously, I've heard a lot of talk that this might be the last movie in the Toy Story series. It'll be a little disappointing if it is, because a lot of the characters, I think, don't get a lot of screen time, I guess is the way to put it. It's really kind of focused on a couple in this one.
Yeah, I didn't grow up on the Toy Story movies. I'm old. I grew up on the silent movies.
Well, hey, that's all right. The Charlie Chaplin, man, he's still a king of cinema,
Right on.
so you're good
Harold
to go there.
Lloyd. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. All right, so the storyline. So we started this out last week when we talked about the Patriots, the Super Bowl winners. Today we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Rams. They lost to the Patriots in a somewhat interesting Super Bowl. Obviously did not put together quite the offensive performance they had all of last year and really the year before that. Their defense, though, was solid against the Patriots. And they really haven't lost much this year on offense or defense. The biggest name leaving in free agency is probably Ndamukong Suh. But again, when you have Aaron Donald on that defensive line, that's a loss that you can take. One of the main storylines going in this year is Jared Goff. Can he take another step forward? He has the same agent as Carson Wentz, so there's been talks that he wants some kind of contract like Carson Wentz. I personally would not put him in the Carson Wentz category. I think Carson Wentz is easily at least a tier above Jared Goff. But fantasy points-wise, Jared Goff has been putting up points. 332 fantasy points last year. He had, 4,688 yards with 32 touchdowns and 12 interceptions last year for 64.9% completion percentage. So a good year. He was not bad at all. Do you expect him to take another step forward in this offense, remain kind of right here where he's at? Has he kind of plateaued, or do you think he takes a step back in 2019?
Well, he's going to get Cooper Kupp back. Todd Gurley is going to experience a slightly reduced workload. Now, they'll probably end up giving some of that to Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson or John Kelly, one of those. But I do think that, let's see, what was Goff? He threw 561 passes last year, which was good for 10th in the NFL. I feel like that's a pretty solid number. Maybe, if they add 10%, that puts him over 600 passes. Only 4 teams had over 600 pass attempts last year. So I feel like he's going to stay pretty close to that. The only thing that could, I think, cause them to throw more is if their defense falls apart, and I don't think that's going to happen either. They've got a good defense. They've got some really, they've got some studs, and they've got a really good scheme. So do I think he's going to take another leap? No, I think he's probably playing pretty close to his ceiling. So coming in and on Fantasy Pros, he was, quarterback 7 on Fantasy Pros. I think that's a reasonable ceiling for him. I wouldn't expect a whole heck of a lot more.
See, I'm kind of torn on Goff here, and it leads really right into the next subject we have. I think a lot of it's going to be based on the offense around him and Todd Gurley. I do think that if Todd Gurley is if he's not healthy and is not able to carry the ball as much as he has been, I know what you're saying about maybe Darrell Henderson, and even is it Malcolm Brown, right? That's the other. I always want to call him.
They matched the contract.
I always want to call him Mike Brown for some reason, and I don't know why. But Malcolm Brown, I do think that they'll do a decent job in Gurley's stead if he ends up having to miss time. But they're not Todd Gurley, and so I would not be surprised if they throw the ball more often going into this season, again, with them getting back Cooper Kupp, who Jared Goff was lights out back in 2017 when he had Cooper Kupp, and he was still pretty good last year before Cooper Kupp went down. And that kind of, for me, I do think he falls right in that 12 to 14 range. I would not be surprised if he jumps up higher than that. I can't remember exactly where he finished last year. Let me pull it right back up because I just had it here. So he finished 6th, actually. I was not expecting that at all. I don't think he finishes that high. I'd probably say he finishes closer to 10, somewhere in the 10 to 14 range. Is that what you said as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not really that far off on our thoughts on Goff. I can't wait till we get to some projections and we're able to start ranking these guys. I'm really interested to see where we differ. But yeah, so we pretty much agree then on Goff on the whole 10 to 14. That, like I said, I feel like that's a fair spot for him to land again. 332 points last year. That was right above, Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers was hurt. So, yeah, I would imagine, though, he falls somewhere in that 10 range for me. Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks. Both Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks finished in the top 14 in fantasy last year. Again, probably some of that due to the fact that Cooper Kupp was out. Robert Woods finished 11th with 265 points, averaging 16.6 points a game, with Brandon Cooks finishing with 243 points, averaging 16.2 points a game. So they were fairly close in their fantasy production last year. Robert Woods putting up 1,219 yards with 6 touchdowns, while Brandon Cooks put up a total of 1,204 yards with 5 touchdowns. So great years for both of them, especially for fantasy. If you had Jared Goff and one of those two, again, me and Dennis, we've talked about this before. I don't think necessarily on the podcast, but we've talked about it before that we really both love to pair a quarterback and wide receiver. So if you paired Goff with one of those guys, you had a great year from them. However, Cooper Kupp, he really was Jared Goff's go-to guy in 2017 and a guy that he relied heavily on. So, with that being said, you brought up that he's coming back. He should be fully healthy in 2019. Hopefully, he doesn't have to worry about any injury lingering or anything like that. He's good to go. Do you think any of the, or no, I don't want to say any of these three because I do think at least one of them will, but with Kupp coming back, will Woods and Cooks finish in the top 14 again in 2019?
You know, I see a scenario where if they all stay healthy, that they all finish between 10 and 20. So
Really?
Woods had
Okay.
130 targets last year. Cooks had 117. And then Kupp had 55 in 8 games. So with Kupp going out, Josh Reynolds ended up with 53 targets. Gurley had 81 targets. So if they're going to reduce Gurley's touches, if they cut his carries by 10%, that's 25 carries. And let's say they cut his targets by 20%. That drops him from 80 to 60. Now you've got the Josh Reynolds targets and the additional Gurley targets that could conceivably support all 3 receivers. It's probably more likely that 2 of them finish in the wide receiver 2 category and one of them drops down into the wide receiver 3 category if they perform like they did last year. I'm not sure. I don't have the through 6 games. So let me go to Fantasy Pros here, and we'll go to the set it at 8 games and see where the guys were.
Okay.
So
Try that now real quick.
through 8 games,
Perfect.
Woods was wide receiver 10, Cooks was wide receiver 17, and Kupp was wide receiver 20. So that's a scenario I think I could see play out over the course of 16 games. Will that be the actual order? That's anybody's guess, I think. It's really, to have a back-end wide receiver 1 and 2 back-end wide receiver 2s, that's a pretty prolific offense there. And I think the Rams have shown that that's the scheme they're going to run. And so they're going to have an efficient offense that can support 4 fantasy relevant players. What really suffers for them is the tight end.
Mm-hmm.
As much as talented as Everett and Higbee are, they're just going to end up splitting 70 targets maybe between the 2 of them, and nobody wins there.
Yeah. Well, if you had to guess between those 3, what are the 2 that you think would finish in the 1 or 2 tier for wide receiver, and the last one that finishes in tier 3?
I think I'm going to stick with Cooks being one of the top 2. I feel like he's the deep threat. He's the one that's going to stretch the field. He's going to get the chunk yardage. And, boy, the other 2 are pretty similar. They're both short to intermediate route guys, with Woods maybe being having a little more deep game to him. but reportedly, Kupp and Goff are great friends and they've got great chemistry. So I am going to stick with Woods and Cooks as the two that finish the highest.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so for me, I think actually Woods takes a step back. I think that's where I'll disagree with you. I think Brandon Cooks, I just think he has more skill than Robert Woods. And I do think that what Kupp did with Goff in 2017 and at the early part of 2018, I think they're going to continue that as long as he's healthy. So I would imagine it's going to end up being Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp right up there in the wide receiver 2 category. However, as crazy as this is to say, I wouldn't be surprised if all three finish in the wide receiver 1 and 2 tiers for fantasy because of what you just said. They don't use the tight end. Cooper Kupp is used pretty much as a tight end in this offense. They rather would go to him than to Higbee or Everett. So I think that kind of right there gives Kupp more value and allows him to kind of sneak into that tier because he's going to get a lot of the dump-offs. I think he's going to get even more now with Todd Gurley possibly losing some of that work. Darrell Henderson, a decent receiver, but not what Todd Gurley is, and neither is Malcolm Brown. So I don't think either one of them get that many receptions that Todd Gurley might lose out on if he is struggling or if they kind of cut his workload back a little bit. I think those will go to Cooper Kupp, which I think then in return allows him to boost up his value even more. So I could see all three going into the wide receiver 1 to 2 tier. I would just say only one makes it into the 1 tier. It would probably be Brandon Cooks for me. However, Robert Woods has outscored him the past couple years, so it is a little bit hard for me to say that, but I'm going to say that if I had to choose two, it's going to be Cooks and Kupp, and Woods finish in third of that group, but I do think all three finish in the wide receiver 2 tier at worst.
Well, yeah, because, looking at the splits, weeks 1 through 8, Goff was up around QB 6, and weeks 9 through 17, he was QB 11, and he finished at QB 7. So, Kupp is they're definitely more productive when they have all three receivers. I don't have Gurley's stats to see. Did he get more? Did his targets go up per game? I wonder in the second half of the season. Maybe that's what helped wear him down a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I've got his receiving work for what he did on the year, but not in any kind of splits.
I still think they're gonna. I stick by my Woods and Cooks will be the top 2 out of those 3.
Gotcha. And there's nothing wrong with that. One of us has got to be right or wrong at some point, right? So, speaking of Gurley, your thoughts really just on him going forward into 2019. We know that he's got the knee issues, the arthritis in the knee. The Rams have come out and said they knew this was going to happen. They're probably going to, base his workload on his knee and how he is going forward. Again, he did not have a bad year last year. Played in just 14 games. With 256 rushes, he got 1,251 yards for 17 touchdowns, added 580 yards in the receiving game with 4 touchdowns. It was, still a very good fantasy back. He finished third in fantasy last year with 372 points and still finished as the best points per game average with 26.6. The next best were Christian McCaffrey and Saquon, who both averaged 24.1 points a game. So still the best running back in fantasy, missing 2 games, mind you. Your thoughts on him going into 2019 overall? Do you think he's still, we've seen in best ball ADPs and everything, he's really kind of dropped to the back end of the first round, early second round pick. Do you think he's still worth a top 5 or 6 pick for a running back in 2019?
Well, you've got Zeke, Kamara, Elliott, McCaffrey, that's your top 4. So then it comes down to who's next. DJ, Mixon, Gurley is in that second tier. I drafted Gurley at 208 in a startup, or 206 in a startup, and I was delighted to get him there. And I'll take him there all day. I'll take him at the 110, 112. In the Podcast Wars draft, I think Rookie Fever took him at 209. That's practically stealing. His knee issue isn't a new thing.
Yeah.
It's something that everybody knew about, something that the team was aware of. It's something that fantasy players should have been aware of. Is it going to be an issue at some point? Sure. Is it going to be next year? I don't think so. I'm betting that no, it's not going to be. That being said, is Gurley going to get 256 touches and 81 targets next year? Probably not. That's a pretty heavy workload, and I think teams generally avoid a workload that heavy. So let's say he drops to 225 carries and 60 or 65 targets. That's still clear-cut top 8 running back touches. So, take Gurley. At some point, you're going to probably end up with a stud dying on your bench, and you're just going to have to live with it.
Yeah.
So if I've got Gurley, I'm not going to sell him at a discount. I'm going to ride him until he's gone, until he breaks down. And at some point, he becomes a throw-in, I guess. But I'm not going to give him away.
No, yeah, I'm right there with you. So, into my main dynasty league, just to give you an idea right now, of the owner who had Todd Gurley, he owned him in both of these leagues that we play in together. He traded him in one league. He got Royce. This was the worst of the two trades. I don't want to say it was a bad trade, but he gave him away. Not gave him away. He got Royce Freeman. Who was his other running? He got a kind of a throw-in wide receiver, but he got 3 first-round picks with it as well. So for me, I was like, that's pretty good value. At least, Royce Freeman, if you believe he's going to be the guy in Denver, you got a starting running back, and you got 3 first-round picks. So that's not a bad deal whatsoever. And then the other one, he got Mike Evans and 2 first-round picks. So if I had to choose the 2 of the deals, I would definitely take the second one, because you're getting a top 12 wide receiver out of it. Even as much as I hate Mike Evans, he's still a top 10 to 12 wide receiver in fantasy. So to get him and then 2 first-round picks for Gurley is worth it. But I'm right there with you. Really quick, before we move on, I'm looking at the way that the running backs finished last year. There's a couple guys here pretty obvious who he should go over, but obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not taking him over Saquon, McCaffrey, Kamara, and Zeke, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then the next guy to finish was Connor. Would that be a question for you? Would it be Gurley or would it be Connor?
I'd probably go Gurley.
Okay. So then I'm wondering if the only other 2 then questions for me, because I'd admit James White was next, and that's easy for me. Melvin Gordon was after that. For me, that's easy. I would take Gurley. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd take Gurley over Melvin. I'd have DJ over him. Okay,
that was the next guy. The next 2 were my big ones, because this one is interesting for me. So DJ, I agree with you. He was the next on the list, and then the next was Joe Mixon. And I honestly think is with the way I think Cincinnati's going to be the ball or play this year and run the ball, that's close. I would probably lean Gurley, but I would probably take Joe Mixon more. If it was a 10 drafts, I'd probably take him 6 out of 10 times over Gurley, just because I think he's got the better upside if you're looking dynasty.
Yeah, I'd take Mixon over Gurley.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
I guess that would put my that'd be Barkley, Zeke, McCaffrey, Kamara, DJ, Mixon. So that puts Gurley around 7.
Yeah.
Followed by Gordon and Connor.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not bad. So like I said, right now, so you can still get him at a discount in most best ball drafts and startups, because again, he's going at the 12th to so what was the last one I saw him in? I know you were just talking about yours. I think the lowest I've seen him go is 2-4. So that's still, and then all those guys that we talked about outside of James White, obviously, all went before him. Mixon actually went behind him. So for me, I'm right there with you. I think Gurley, even if he struggles a little bit this year and they do cut his workload back, I can't imagine he's much worse than a top 7 to 8 back in fantasy. He's still worth the pick, and I still think he's going to be good for a couple years. I know everybody wants to talk about how Jay Ajayi fell off the map here. Todd Gurley is a much better athlete and a much better running back overall than Jay Ajayi is or ever was. I don't think that's a fair comparison to make just due to the fact that they both had the same injury. Gurley has proved to be productive even dealing with the injury, where once we saw Jay Ajayi start to struggle with it, he really completely just fell off the map. And I don't think that's a fair comparison, just in my opinion. Do I think Todd Gurley is going to fall off the map eventually? Yes, but I don't see it happening next year, this year. I would say it's probably 3 years down the road.
Yeah. So would you take Nick Chubb over Gurley?
Ooh, playing into my homerism.
I am. I drew that bow and shot that arrow.
If
right
it's
to your heart.
If it's Dynasty, honestly, I would, and that's just because I like the way that the Browns are set up right now. I think they are going to be on par with that offense. I think they have a fairly close to a similar offensive line. I would take Baker at quarterback over him. Now, I would not take coaching-wise. Sean McVay, I think we've got to see it from Freddie Kitchen. Sean McVay's proven that he's an elite offensive coach, in my opinion at least. But just for long-term, yes, because I don't think the drop-off from Chubb, I know a lot of people are going to say, I want to win this year, so give me the best player. My argument against that would be is I don't think Todd Gurley puts up the 26.6 average again this year. I think he drops down to probably somewhere to 21 to the 19 range, and I don't think Chubb is that far off from that. I think he could easily average 16, 17 points a game, and you also have him likely for a longer run than you would Gurley. So personally, I would try to take my Browns bias out of it, but I would not fault anybody for taking Gurley over Chubb again, just because he's the better prospect. Is it even close for you with those two?
It's pretty close. I could see myself probably 3 out of 10 times taking Chubb. It's just one of those things where I feel like I would end up going, all right, I've got enough Gurley kind of approach. So,
hey, I got you. Like I said, I admit that there's probably a little bit of homerism in here. I'm trying to bury down. That's still coming out and I'll admit Gurley is the better prospect. It's not. I don't want to say it's not close, but Gurley's a much better receiver. He's more proven than Chubb has been. Again, and I don't think that, and I won't even use the injury card here either, because I do think Gurley's going to be good for the next 3 years. I just don't think the drop-off is that much, so give me Chubb, because I can also just, again, I guess part of it is a little bit of homerism. It's someone I know I'll be watching every Sunday as well, so it makes it more fun to root for. All right, so this next little thing we're going to do here is something we're going to do within the next couple of weeks. We're going to continue going to do it into a more deeper basis as we get closer to the season. I just kind of wanted to start it today. Again, we were going to do it with our special guest. I thought it'd be a little bit of fun because he's known for his hot takes. But again, he was sick, so we hope he does get well, and we cannot wait to get him on here eventually. But we're going to do a little bit of higher or lower. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quarterback and give you where they finished last year with their points and average points, and then you're going to tell me if you think they finish higher in 2019 or lower in 2019. This gives some of our listeners a little bit of an idea of where we think they're moving in 2019. We're going to start with the number one quarterback last year in Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, he cannot finish higher than what he did last year, as he finished number one. He finished with 417 points last year, a 26.1 average, just completely killed it at the quarterback position. Nobody was even close. The next best quarterback was was over 60 points behind him. So, Patrick Mahomes, now obviously, again, he can't finish higher because he finishes the number one, so the other way I'll form it with just Patrick Mahomes is, does he stay at one, or do you expect him to finish lower in 2019?
I am on the regression train, and he can regress pretty far and still finish number one.
Yeah.
I don't think 50 touchdown seasons are pretty far and few and far between. So I do think he's going to regress. I still think he's going to be in that, and part of it is his supporting cast. I don't think Damian Williams or Carlos Hyde are on par with Kareem Hunt. I don't think anybody they have in the wide receiver core is on par with Tyreek Hill. So there's going to be some regression that occurs because of that. I think when Hill comes back from suspension, there'll be a bounce back, but that's not gonna that isn't gonna make any of those running backs Kareem Hunt. I think Mahomes is gonna drop back. He's not gonna finish number one. I think he's gonna be number two, but I don't think he'll be number one.
I think I'm going to stick with him at number one. I've been going back and forth on this for a long time here, and there's only one quarterback that I think could challenge him from that spot. They are on the list. We're about to get to him. I agree with you that I think he's going to take some regression, but again, I just talked about it. So the next best quarterback last year was Matt Ryan, who finished 63 points behind him, fantasy-wise, over 16 games. That's ridiculous. I agree with you. He's going to take a step back. The team is not overall as good as it was around him. The one thing I'll say is neither that defense is just as bad or possibly even worse than it was last year. I think they're going to have to rely on Patrick Mahomes and that offense to try and score and put up points. Andy Reid has always been a very good offensive coach and been able to score points. So I think they're going to at least score points, even if Patrick Mahomes takes a couple steps back, not just one or two. Say he takes 3 or 4 steps back, I still think he has a chance. With 60-point difference, that gives him a lot of room to work with. I do think he still finishes as the number one quarterback in 2019. The next quarterback that I want to talk about is the one that I think could challenge him and could be one that finishes up there right at 1 or possibly 2, so I guess that probably already gives my answer when we get to it. But Andrew Luck, he finished as quarterback 5 last year. I put him as 3 because I don't know how to read. But he did finish as quarterback 5 with 327 points last year with an average of 20.4 points a week. Do you think he finishes higher or lower in 2019?
I think he finishes higher. I have Luck as my QB1 for 2019. Okay. So I think he's finally he's going to be 2 years removed from the shoulder. I think his supporting cast is better than it's been in a while. With people want to bag on Funchess, but he's a pretty solid slot guy. T.Y. Hilton is a good wide receiver. Adding Paris Hilton to the mix.
I'm Paris, and we'll be friends forever.
They got a couple young guys in Darius Fountain and Deion Kane that they really like. The tight ends and Ebron and Doyle have some value. And then they've got a really good running game with Marlon Mack. I think bringing in Spencer Ware to back him up is going to provide what they had hoped Jordan Wilkins could as a backup. And then Nyheim Hines is a great pass-catching back. So I do think that Luck is going to take a big step and finish as the QB1 in 2019.
All right, before I move forward, were you watching any kind of cheeseburger commercials or any kind of special videos before you jumped on here?
Nope.
Okay, because you said Paris Hilton, so I was just wondering if maybe you had her on your mind before I knew who you meant. I know everybody else knows you meant Paris Campbell, but I was my mind went to a bad place. Beautiful. He is beautiful. He is beautiful. All right. Anyways, I'm right there with you. I have no argument against Luck. I'm right there with you. He's got probably the best offense he's had around him in his career at Indianapolis. Again, 2 years now off from that shoulder injury. Should be good to go. We saw him have a phenomenal year last year, especially after a couple weeks into the season when he really started getting going in week 3, week 4. He really started to turn it on, look like the old Andrew Luck. And I'm right there with you. Like I said, I could easily see him finishing at the number 1 spot. He is the only quarterback, in my opinion, out of the entire list that I think could challenge Patrick Mahomes for that number 1 spot. So I've got him right there at 1 and 2. I haven't finished my rankings yet. I'm debating on if I want. I'm probably going to keep Mahomes at 1 and put Luck 2, but I would not be surprised if Luck ends up finishing the year as a number 1 quarterback because, again, they just have a phenomenal offensive line, just tons of weapons around him, and Luck is just so good, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that with him being gone for that entire season. Hopefully you kind of realized that last year with as good as he looked in the back half of the season, or at least after Game 3. But yeah, he's someone that I would not count out. Unfortunately, he is getting drafted a lot higher this year than he was last year, so you're not going to be able to get him at a discount. But he is definitely someone that I'm buying into big here in 2019.
You know, I will be honest, it's about 7:20, and after working all day, a cheeseburger does sound good.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I almost had one today. My wife made some like wonderful little chips and queso and some nice little sandwiches and everything, so that's what I ate. But yeah, I could always go for a cheeseburger. It's probably why my wife is side-eyeing me a lot lately, because I'm starting to put on a little bit of weight. I forgot that as I get older, my metabolism and everything doesn't quite work as well as it used to.
This is not good for my image.
Look at me, I'm a big fat slob. I've got bigger titties than you do. I've got more chins than a Chinese phone pig. I've not seen my willy in 2 years, which is long enough to declare legally dead.
You happy? Fatty make a funny?
Going full dad bod, are you?
Well, I hear it's in this year, so, why not? Why not embrace it and see if, the ladies will keep coming, or at least if the wife looks at me differently. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you updated on that. But next up is Deshaun Watson. He finished as quarterback 4 last year with 331 points with an average of 20.7 a game. Do you think he finishes higher or lower than QB4 in 2019?
All right, so we've established that it's, in my eyes, it's Luck 1, Mahomes 2. So then it comes down to who is next. There's Ryan, there's Roethlisberger, there's Watson, there's Rodgers, there's Breeze. So Breeze was QB 8, and he had an uncharacteristically down season.
Yeah.
But I do think, too, that they're not going to go back. They're not going to throw the ball 600 times. I think New Orleans is dialing it back a little bit. That their defense has really improved. They don't need to necessarily play. So it really comes down to Rodgers, Watson, Matt Ryan. I think Ben is going to, he finished his QB3 last year. I think he had a career high in pass attempts. I do think that's going to drop back some with AB going out. They need Moncrief and Washington to step up into that Juju role, and Juju step up into the AB role. And so there's going to be a lot of let's give it to James Conner. So I do think Ben's going to drop. QB4, that's right about where I would expect him to be, somewhere between 3 to 5. I love Aaron Rodgers. I think Matt Ryan is going to be the QB3. He's got Dirk Cutter back. Calvin Ridley going into his second year. Julio is a stud. Austin Hooper is a reliable tight end. Devontae Freeman is healthy. So, Atlanta has some weapons. And Atlanta has a better offensive line than Houston. So I think that Watson is going to have a good season. But he's going to – so that means I got to decide, is it going to be Watson or Rodgers at QB4? And, boy, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with Watson. I think he's going to stay even.
All right.
Is that a cop-out?
No.
Pick higher or lower?
No, you can say at 4. I mean, I understand that. He stays even. I get that. No worries at all. For me, it's lower. So kind of everything you were just talking about, if I were to go through it in my head and look at the way they finished last year, Patrick Mahomes, I would say, is probably going to stay above him. I keep Matt Ryan ahead of him. I'm with you. I think Big Ben takes a big step back this year. I don't think a lot of people looked, and I know he had a great year numbers-wise, but I don't think he looked quite as good as he has been. I think Big Ben is in for some serious regression here in 2019. So I would move him out of that 3 spot. Andrew Luck, I've already talked about, would be right up there, 1 or 2. I'd probably put Matt Ryan at 3. I think Rodgers easily jumps to Deshaun Watson if he stays healthy. I mean, again, he finished, right behind? I mean, 15, 17 points behind him, and he was injured. I mean, dude had a messed up MCL from, 2 quarters into the first game and came back out. And now he's got, hopefully they're going to lean more on Aaron Jones. These wide receivers will have another year in the system and working with him. So I take him over him. And then, of course, my quarterback 5. I'm going to leave as a mystery for now because we will talk about them later. But I do think Deshaun Watson falls below that quarterback as well. I don't think he falls much farther than 4. I think he does finish right around the 5 or 6 range, but I don't think he finishes in the top 4. So give me lower on Deshaun Watson. Next up, Mr. Teflon Tommy, Tom Brady. Now, this one might be easy, might be hard. Maybe you have him staying right at where he's at, like you did with Watson. He finished with 280 points last year, averaging 17.5 points again. Again, it looked like Tom had a very down year when you looked at it for fantasy, yet he finished, at least statistics-wise, pretty close to what he's done every year, minus a couple of the touchdowns, which is probably the little bit of regression that he took in finishing 14, because he does finish right around in the top 12. Again, not that far off of the top 12 here, finishing really just, it's surprising to me that, I'm sorry, I was just looking at my wrong thing. I thought Eli Manning finished ahead of him there for a second. Finished literally points, as in 2 points behind Cam Newton, who finishes the 12th quarterback. So he was not that far off of the top 12. But do you think he continues to slide back? Does he fall lower than 14 in 2019? Does he jump up back into the top 12? Or does he stay right around 14 for you next year?
I don't think he climbs into the top 12. 14, I think Brady at this point is a QB2. I could see... when I kind of was going through the list quickly, I think I had about 15 guys I felt pretty comfortable being above him. So I'm going to say he's going to drop maybe a spot or 2.
Okay.
I think it's going to be Sony Michel season. I think they're going to give him the ball. Michel will probably sit out a couple games because of his knee with the swelling. But again, much like Todd Gurley, it's not an unknown condition, and they will manage it. It wouldn't surprise me if he practices virtually not at all during the season. But Michel is, I think he's in line for, 1,100 yards and 12 to 15 touchdowns. I think he's shown he can carry that load, and Belichick isn't averse to using him up during his first contract and letting him leave after 4 years, not giving him that 5th-year option and letting him go. So I feel like it's with Gronk going out and retiring, they've got N'Keal Harry coming in, Julian Edelman, old reliable, is still going to be there. James White's going to be there. But Edelman and White, they're catching short passes. And so I think the Patriots game is turning into that dink and dunk and grind it out, which means Brady might have a good number of attempts, but not a ton of yards. And when they get in close, I think they're going to be letting Michel hammer it in from, the 3-yard line. So I think he's going to drop to at least 15.
I'm right there with you, I think. And I hate that we are agreeing so much at the moment, but I just don't see him finishing much more above 14. I'm right there with you. I actually have like 16 quarterbacks ahead of him, and we've already talked about this. We talked about it on the last episode with Sony Michel. We think this is going to be a more run-heavy team. I'm not that much of a believer in N'Keal Harry stepping up and replacing Gronk on this offense. So give me the same. I have him dropping down to right about 16 or 17. Again, that's not a huge drop. It was last year. If you're looking at the 17 quarterback, they finished with 215 points compared to the 280. I would imagine that those guys will come up a little bit more, but I don't see him finishing much below 280 points, maybe around the 260, 270, but I think it'll drop him lower than 14, right around the 16 to 17 range. So, the next quarterback, it's my guy.
Warm-up's not really, but when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
He woke up feeling dangerous, and this is exactly who I was talking about. Baker Mayfield, the Bake Show, finished as quarterback 16 last year, tied with Eli Manning, both finishing with 240 points again. Only 14 games last year, averaged 17.1 points. He's the guy I was talking about. I think is going to finish in the top 5 and dethrone Deshaun Watson. I feel like this is also a very easy question. Baker Mayfield, higher or lower of quarterback 16 in 2019?
Yeah, that's a slam dunk. It's going to be higher. I think, probably the better question is, you have him at 5. Well, where do I think he'll go? Because he started 13 games and he attempted 486 passes.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you remember? Did he go in at halftime of the 14th game, the third game of the season? Did he go in at halftime? How early did he go in?
I think it was like 3 minutes to go before halftime, because Tyrod Taylor was driving him down the field. It wasn't quite halftime yet. He had a couple of drives in there, because the first drive kind of stalled out, and then that was when he was just zipping the ball in there. And that next drive, and everyone was like, holy crap, this kid has a cannon on him. So it was, I want to say it was right around 3 minutes left in the second quarter when he came in there for Tyrod.
So let's give him 70 more attempts then. So that puts him at 550. So that's going to put him probably 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns. So, how does that stack up with Deshaun Watson? So 31 touchdowns, and let me get back to the Texans here. Or actually, just go back to my quarterbacks.
Well, right now he's projected for 4,000 yards passing with, where'd it go? 26 touchdowns. Of course, he does get the rushing as well, so they have him projected for 551 rush yards in 2019 and 4 rushing touchdowns.
So, but Watson gets the same rushes, so they're both 23 years old. Watson has, 2 more years in the NFL on him?
Yeah.
I think, as a whole, Cleveland has a better offensive line. We've got some issues at our left tackle, but as a whole, the other 4 guys on our line are pretty solid. OBJ and Nuke is as close to a wash as you're going to get. Landry versus Fuller, 2 completely opposite type of players, but I think they're pretty close to a wash. Callaway versus Kuti. I'd probably give a slight edge to Kuti. I give Njoku the edge at tight end over the Texans tight ends, and Cleveland has the better running game. So it's going to be, they're going to be right neck and neck, I think, in that 5-6 range for quarterback. I think they're going to have pretty similar stats this year. So I don't know if, I haven't projected it solidly enough to say I definitely think Watson is going to be 5 and Mayfield is going to be 6 or vice versa. But it's going to be, those 2 are going to be there. Mayfield's definitely going to be higher than 16.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if Mayfield was 3 or 4, just because he's a smart player. He is willing to take some chances, which can lead to big plays. And if you get some big plays, that's how you end up with those 400-yard, 450-yard, 3 or 4 touchdown games. And you put 2 or 3 of those up during the season, and that can really boost your statistics. So easily top 10 for me for Mayfield. I don't know if I'd go number 5. It's a coin flip, I think, right now between Mayfield and Watson at 5.
Fair enough. These next 2 quarterbacks are kind of the same thing as Baker Mayfield. It's obvious, at least in my opinion, it's obvious that they're going to be higher. I've got them on here because I kind of want to get an idea of where you think they fall. So Matt Stafford, who finished as QB 19 last year. Goodness, I just lost his stats. So 212 points, 13.3 point average. Again, this is a guy who consistently over his entire career has finished in the top 10 to 12 quarterback every year. Your thoughts on him? Again, I think it's an easy call. I think he finishes higher than 19. I think this offense all around in Detroit is going to be better than it was last year. But how much higher do you think he climbs from 19 in 2019?
Well, as much as we love Stafford, last season was an outlier, but it wasn't really, I don't know if I'm going to project him to get another 700 yards, which would get him back closer to his career average, because Darrell Bevell is running the offense now, and Matt Patricia comes from that Belichick tree, and they've got a good offensive line, and they've got Kerryon Johnson, they've got C.J. Anderson, they've got Zach Zenner, so they've got guys that can run the ball. So unless they fall behind, which is possible, I mean, their defense is pretty average. It wouldn't, I could see Stafford. The last 4 seasons, his high in attempts, or last 6 seasons, his high in attempts was only 300, or completions was 398. He's thrown just under, the last 4 seasons, just under 500 passes with a low of 555 last year. It helps if I look at the right column. So is he going to, he's going to be comfortably up from 19. But I could see him being QB 13 just as easily as I could see him being QB 10.
All right, and then what about, Carson Wentz? So he finished as QB 21 last year, 22. Again, a lot of injuries last year and did not play the full season, just 11 games, 192 points with a 17.5 average. Again, I think we both are in agreement he finishes higher than 22. How high does he go for you?
Just 3,100 yards in 11 games. So that's close to a 4,500-yard pace. They've added J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Alshon Jeffries, a good wide receiver that can get in the end zone, plays big. Aguilar's still solid. They've got some weapons. They've got Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. And Wentz isn't afraid to use both of them. I'm at 21. What was his? Let's look at his per game average as opposed to his season average and see where that was. That might give us a little better read on him. Let's see one. So even then at per game, he was at 18, QB 18. Boy, that's a disappointing number. Yeah. I really had hoped it would be higher. So,
well, you got to remember, he only played 11 games last year, too.
Right, but that's why I went with the per game average as opposed to his total games.
Right. Well, yeah, but I meant as in the fact that points. Like he was still dealing with injury, I think, more significantly than we were all led to believe last year, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think he was ever fully healthy in 2018, which is why I kind of brought up the question, just because he's supposedly out there in practice, he's moving without a knee brace and all that stuff, so he's supposedly coming into 2019 fully healthy. Again, he has the history of injuries here for him, so that might skew it a little bit, but just kind of to give that as a red flag on him, or however you want to use it.
Well, let's play either or here. Obviously he's behind Mahomes, Ryan, Watson, Luck, Rodgers, Wilson, Prescott. You gonna put him above Dak Prescott?
That one's close for me. Just looking at the way they finished last year, Like I said, I think Ben takes a big step back. I'll just put it. I have Wentz right around 9 and 10. I think he finishes in that 8 to 10 range. So where Breeze, Wilson, Dak finished last year. I don't know about Goff, Roethlisberger. Dak is the line right now. So Dak finished at 10 for 10 last year. I'm almost wanting to say no just because I don't want to go full on Cowboy hater, but I really think that that's kind of the line right there. I probably would put him over Dak just because I think they have the better offense, but I think that's right around where he finishes is at 10 in 2019.
Well, Dak was 17.9 points per game, and Wentz was 17.5. So there's not a big gap there.
Right.
I think Dak makes up for it with a little more running. I think they'll do everything they can to discourage Wentz from running.
Yeah.
I think that's where he gets dinged up. So, I think Cam is likely to finish above him. Cousins is going to take a step up from 13. I think Cousins is in for a really nice year. Baker's coming up. So, the 10 to 12 range, I think a back-end QB1. And if whether it's Arcega-Whiteside or Alshon stays healthy all season, if the two of those guys get going, it could really provide a boost to the passing game downfield. Those two guys might not get a lot of yards after the catch, but they're very good at getting the contested ball. So a 20-yard pass with, 1 yard of yak is a 21-yard pass. And I think sorry to go all mathy on you there. So Wentz at 10 to 12 is probably a pretty reasonable landing spot.
So that right there will do it for our higher and lower right now on the quarterbacks, and we'll continue to do this throughout the offseason. Dennis really kind of wanted to touch on a tweet here before we cut out of here. Brad Kelly of the Draft Network, you can find him at BradKelly17, put up a nice little thing on Twitter that 12 teams have never won a Super Bowl. The Cardinals, the Falcons, the Bills, the Panthers, the Bengals, the Browns, the Lions, the Texans, the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Titans. Which of these 12 has the best chance to win their first Super Bowl this season? I feel like I've kind of already answered this, so I'll let you go first, and then I'll give you my answer.
Well, there are some teams I'm going to kind of just throw out. The Bills and the Cardinals, the Bengals, the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Lions, and the Titans, I think they're out of the mix. So, the Falcons, they're going to have a good team. They've been to the Super Bowl, so I could see them making a push and getting there. And having a team with the experience of playing in the big game, I could see them getting there and winning it. I think they're hungry. The Panthers, I don't think, I think I don't think they're gonna do it. They're very much like the Falcons, and they've got a lot of guys on their team that have been there not too long ago. But I'm not sold on. I'm not sold yet on them being able to get there. The Browns, it's probably a season too early. I think they need some more time to gel. The Chargers, that's an interesting team. They're going to have a pretty solid defense. If Bosa can stay healthy, he takes a lot of pressure off Ingram on the other side, and that makes their pass rush really, really good. They've got some good defensive backs to hold down the back end. And then the Vikings. Talk about always a bridesmaid, never a bride. They've, much like Buffalo, they've been there 4 times and not won. They didn't go 4 in a row, though. So, but I think, if Dalvin Cook stays healthy all year and gives the running game the boost that he showed last year with Diggs and Thielen. You know, they've got the firepower to get there, and they've got a really solid defense. If I had to pick one of the Falcons, the Chargers, the Vikings, the Panthers, I'm probably gonna lean the Falcons. That's probably the chalky answer. If I have to pick one of the other ones that I think are just don't really have a shot, I could see the Titans kind of just playing ugly football all the way and just, you know, being that team that has some breaks go their way. I could see the Texans the same way. Just have some breaks go their way. And, you know, they've got a guy that just makes a play at the most opportune time. I take that back. I think of teams that could happen to, the Texans would probably be my pick there. I could see, you know, because they've got the playmakers on defense that could cause a turnover, be returned for a touchdown to win them a game unexpectedly in the playoffs or something. Deshaun Watson with some big game experience in college. I could see him, you know, just making a play. So I think it's going to be the Falcons is the chalk play here, and I think the Texans are the long shot here.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to keep it. When our listener Ricky sent in a question a couple episodes ago and asked us if we thought the Browns would be that first team to win a Super Bowl like the Blues and the Raptors did for their championships just a couple weeks ago. And I said the Chargers. The Chargers are a team that I really think is being overlooked. Mostly, I think, because of the way they kind of got beat by the Patriots last year in the playoffs. They have a really good team, a really good defense, and a really good offense, and coached by a really good coach in Anthony Lynn. So if I had to pick one of those teams, for me, it would be the Chargers this year. I'm right there with you. I don't think the Falcons are that far off. They've already, like you said, they've been there. You know, the Vikings, it's just hard for me to see the Vikings beating the Rams, although they did come pretty close last year in that shootout in Los Angeles, so maybe they could. I really think for me, if I'm looking at that list, it comes down to those three like you were talking about, and the Vikings, the Chargers, and the Falcons. And for me, just give me the Chargers because I think they have the easier path at least to get there. I think the NFC right now is just a much stronger conference overall than the AFC. You know, you would sit there and say the Patriots, but I do think the Patriots are going to take a little bit of a step back. I think this is everybody's time in the AFC to kind of capitalize within the next year or so, with Tom Brady possibly starting to slow down just a little bit. If they can somehow find a way to stop that run, stop the run, which they could not do in the playoffs, I think the Chargers have a really good shot, so that's my team off of that list. All right, before we cut out of here, I forgot to put this in the show notes, but I did do it. So we posted on Twitter, and then obviously talked about on the show last week to post a GIF or picture of your favorite college team and or player for a little bit of Devy stuff, as we're going to start talking about Devy soon as well. We had a bunch of submissions, so we do really appreciate that. I went ahead and randomized it earlier today. We had about 18 submissions, so it sucks that we can only pull 2 out of this. Depending on how things go with the rating review, if we don't get enough of that, I may pull someone else off of this one, since so many people kind of chimed in here and dropped a lot of gifts, which we do appreciate. So the winner of the first spot was at Dale_Down_Under. He posted a GIF of Wisconsin. Looked like a little older one. I think it was Jonathan. No, it was Jonathan Taylor. But it was Wisconsin players. So we appreciate that, Dale. We'll get you in.
A Packers fan from Australia posting a Wisconsin Badgers college game.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, it got randomized, and that's who ended up winning it. And then the other one, if I can find you here, was at Botello. BOTELLOIII, I guess is what it is. He posted Vince Young a gif of Vince Young and his probably most famous run where he ran into the corner of the end zone against USC to pretty much beat them in the national championship game. First, Gerardo Boatello. So those two will be in. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for doing that. Again, I will add you guys probably on Wednesday. I'll give you guys a chance to listen to this episode before we add you in there, and then it leaves just one more spot available. So again, if we don't get enough rates or reviews in time, probably within the next 2 weeks, because I do kind of want to start getting ready to get this started so we can get all this stuff squared away. I might just pull somebody off of this Debbie one because, again, we had a bunch of great submissions on there, and I hate that we were only able to pull 2. So, again, though, as Dennis has brought up many times, I've brought up, rate and review the podcast. You still have a chance at the moment to get in for that last spot. Again, you guys will win if you win the league, get a free NFL jersey, and you get a free Knights of the Round Table t-shirt. And before we cut out of here, Dennis, I want to talk about your promotion with the Dynasty Nerds, which, again, congratulations on that. What we've got going on with that, and if you want to plug the Midwest Expo as well really quick before we cut out of here.
Well, I have accepted the position of managing editor over at Dynasty Nerds. I've been writing for them for about a year and a half now, and I'm excited to step into a role where I can help shape the content coming down the pipe as we've got as we've brought on some new writers and the site has really started to grow pretty quickly. We've got some guys that are doing some Devy stuff, and we're getting more into IDP, and all of this stuff really feeds into our mission to make people better Dynasty players. And I'm really excited to see what we can do going forward. I think we have a really great product, and we've got a bunch of guys that are really passionate about Dynasty fantasy football, and I'm honored to be part of the team over there at Dynasty Nerds. And so I'm really excited about that. And I thank Rich and Matt and Garrett and Josh for giving me the opportunity. It's really something I'm excited about. As for writing, I'm still working on the 32 teams in 32 days. We've got another one came out today. That's a project with a lot of the writers taking on everybody's taking a team and sort of laying out what the fantasy prospects look like for that team. I'm working on the Dallas Cowboys will be my next one coming out.
I'm sorry about that.
Not me. It all starts with Zeke. And Amari Cooper said he wanted to, have 2,000 yards receiving.
Yeah,
so
I saw that. Good luck with that, buddy.
He's got the quarterback to do it, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It's not like any targets are going to the tight end. So, but I'll be doing the Dallas Cowboys there. We will be up in Canton at the Canton Civic Center. We'll have a booth at the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo on Sunday, August 18th. If you are planning to attend, go online, buy your ticket, pre-purchase, enter the coupon code KNIGHTS, KNIGHTS, for $5 off your admission. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun, and congratulations again to you. It is well deserved, and I know you worked hard for it. Again, you're one of the better Twitter follows in the industry, and again, you do a lot to help a lot of people out, as everybody has attested to, especially the people we've brought on here. I should say you've brought on here. They've all talked about how much you've helped them out, so it is well deserved. I'm really happy for you, buddy, and I can't wait to see what you do to help them grow even more, as I feel like Dynasty Nerds are really kind of becoming one of the pinnacle parts of this industry, and the way that we're going to continue to grow under your guys' role with you taking over where you have is going to be a lot of fun. We do have a draft episode coming up on Thursday as well, guys. We talked a little bit this weekend about it. I heard a lot of you talking about that and some of the stuff that we mentioned in the last episode. So we will do a mock draft episode Thursday and kind of talk about different strategies as well on that. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Again, follow Dennis at culture_coach. You can find me at SportsFanaticMB on Twitter. You can find the podcast at Roundtable FF as well. Please make sure to follow them, as a lot of that stuff that we post through the podcast will come through there as well, besides just me and Dennis. And then again, please rate and review. It would mean a lot to us. It really helps us out. It helps out the Full-Time Fantasy Network as well. So please rate and review if you guys get a few minutes. It really takes like 10 seconds, and it means a lot more to me and Dennis than you guys may think it does, because it's just a couple buttons and a couple words. You think it's not a big deal, but it does mean a lot to us, so we would really appreciate it. So Dennis, thank you so much for jumping on with me again today, and I look forward to talking to you on Thursday about some drafts.
Right on.
Prepare for glory! I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump at me. Golly!
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
Truly embracing your complexities means rejecting anything that can harm who you are, like smoking cigarettes, which can damage nearly every part of your body. Tap the banner to see more. This free life. Freedom to be tobacco-free. Truly embracing your complexities means rejecting anything that can harm who you are, like smoking cigarettes, which can damage nearly every part of your body. Tap the banner to see more. This free life. Freedom to be tobacco-free.